going on, everyone? It's LJ, and it's time for a rock and metal update! Oh yeah, another month has gone by, and here's another dozen finds that have either just come in or been sitting here for months, waiting for their turn on the turntable. Now let's start with 1985, Possessed, 7 Churches, the debut from Possessed. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm not much of a death metal fan these days, but I did get heavily into it in the late 80s and early 90s. That's here nor there. Now, I've never considered Possessed to be death metal anyways, and so I finally grabbed reissues of all 3 albums. Minty fresh copies. Now, I'm still busy absorbing them, and I'll share them over time, but it's been a good long time since I've heard the debut, 7 Churches. Still not my everyday brand of vodka, but man, when that Sepultura mood hits, and it hits hard, I'm glad they're here. Raw, vicious, and aggressive. But not without a sense of melody and some insane shredding. I gotta be honest here, I'd forgotten how great this album is, and the reissue sounds unreal. So let's hang out in 1985 for a minute. Here's another debut, out the same year. This is Agent Steel's Skeptics Apocalypse. What a year! That gives us Possessed, 7 Churches and Agent Steel's Skeptics Apocalypse. High-pitched vocals, teetering between speed and thrash metal like so many did at the time, and set against a science fiction backdrop. Debuts this powerful just don't happen anymore. Short, but if an album's impact can be made in 30 minutes, and filler for filler's sake can be avoided, I'm good with that, and you should be too. Now, if that doesn't look like the inner sleeve of Aerosmith's Toys in the Attic, nothing does. But from 1989, here's Destruction's Live Without Sense. Recorded during the Release from Agony tour, this is an hour of Teutonic thrash. From a production perspective, it's a live album, right? And it's a little lacking in the bottom end, but it's a fantastic album that I was missing on vinyl because, well, Destruction albums pop up all the time, or not so much. Now, Destruction had added a second guitarist not long before, and it made a huge improvement in their sound. Because I'm not all that crazy about the debut, that first album. It's more later that I really started to enjoy Destruction albums. Now, tracks like Life Without Sense and Reject Emotions come flying off the wax. This is a thrash classic, and the last album to feature Marcel on vocals until he returned like 10 years later in the late 90s or early 2000s. Absolutely killer album. Tickled Pink to add it to the collection. Tickled Pink. Who writes this stuff? And like we hung out in 85, let's hang out in 89. And I swear I did not sequence it this way. But from 1989, here is Nuclear Assault's Handle with Care. Man, this was my first Nuclear Assault album back in 89, my favorite to this day, and if ever a band hit their stride in a huge way, it was right here. Nuclear Assault was formed around 84 by former members of Anthrax and TT Quick. High Roller, once again, giving tired original pressings, much like mine, a much-needed break with a killer reissue. It's pretty similar. If you've not heard it, Nuclear Assault is real similar to early Anthrax by this point in style and packing instant classics like Trail of Tears, Search and Seizure, killer song, Torture Tactics, and New Song, which I believe there was a video for. Handle with Care is a metal masterpiece that just bleeds thrash perfection. You just can't beat the new wave of British heavy metal. You can't. And I've showed so many compilations, new releases that High Roller has put together and put out over the years. Kind of just grabbing everything out there that's available from bands that may have only released a single or two, or maybe only even a demo. Put together a comprehensive one-stop shop, and it's here, you got it album, like this one from 2016. And this is Geddes Axe. Geddes Axe was formed in 1979 and inspired by, oh man, what would have been then young and hungry acts like Def Leppard and Saxon. High Roller does it again, another labor of leather that grabs everything this obscure band ever recorded, released, and even a few that never saw the light of day. Man, 12 songs, near an hour of new wave of British heavy metal greatness that captures the spirit of that era perfectly. from a band that folded around 82 or 83 before ever gaining the worldwide notoriety they deserved. Now here's something of a grail, an album I've hunted high and low for a long time for a nice copy. From 1993, here is Anthrax's Sound of White Noise, and it's the album that separates Anthrax fans right down the middle, y'all, because it was the debut of Armored Saint vocalist John Bush, who replaced fan favorite, mine too, Joey Belladonna. Sonically, this is the natural continuation of 1990s darker and less thrashy Persistence of Time, and also Armored Saint's own 1991 release, Symbol of Salvation, another phenomenal album. This one's definitely radio and MTV friendly, but it's still packed front to back with amazing and heavy tracks like Only, Killer Song, and Potter's Field. This was Anthrax's last truly great album for me for nearly 20 years when Joey Belladonna finally returned for 2011's Worship Music. So let's bring the noise and stay on the Anthrax train. From 2016, this one was unavoidable, and this is Anthrax Thrash in Texas, an FM broadcast from a show at the Arcadia Theater in Dallas, Texas. Sound quality? Spot on for an FM broadcast. Energy is off the charts, and it warps you right back to your bedroom in 1987. What an insane set list that draws from earlier albums like Fistful of Metal, Spreading the Disease, Armed and Dangerous, and at the time the newly released Among the Living, and a couple of covers thrown in for good measure as well. Now, according to the back cover of Anthrax's EP, I'm the Man, there's live versions of Caught in a Mosh and I Am the Law that came from this same concert and were replicated on that EP, which is on the shelf. Now, I don't know, because again, with the sound quality here being spot on for an FM broadcast, meaning not soundboard quality, and the I'm the Man EP definitely being a well-produced album, if those are truly the live cuts, then there is a soundboard quality boot of this out there somewhere that's not yet been released. But hats off, man, to Back in Black for putting this out, because Anthrax boots don't pop up all the time, and this was just a period for the band that was never matched again. Phenomenal release. Back to the new wave of British heavy metal, back to 1980. Ooh, look at that evil cover. This is the debut from Witchfynde, Give 'Em Hell. And it's one of those albums that the muddy, raw production only intensifies it. Now, alright, back to the cover. So the cover would lead you to believe it's heavier than it is, but that's now. In 1980, covers like this weren't yet standard issue, and all that imagery that came along with 80s metal hadn't happened yet. And this was plenty heavy enough at the time to suit the image. Mid-paced magic and the perfect companion to like an early Diamond Head. Steve Bridges' vocals, Montalo's leads, and Pete Sergi's bass lines are all slicing dead on new wave of British heavy metal perfection. From my favorite track, The Haunting, Leaving the Deer, man, I love that song, to the Rockin' Ready to Roll. Every track is a classic, and it's great to finally have a minty fresh, brandy new copy in the collection. Seek it out, it's worth it. Speaking of albums that had to be sought out, from 1987, here's a beautiful copy of Lääz Rockit's Know Your Enemy. Still in the shrink, still has the store tag on it. Now, this was 3 years after the debut, and one of my all-time favorite US power metal albums, 1984's City's Gonna Burn. Lääz Rockit ratchets up the intensity to 10, and they release an album which has less in common with the debut, and more in common with something like Flotsam and Jetsam's 1986 debut, Doomsday for the Deceiver, or even Heathen's debut, Breaking the Silence, that was released the same year. Now, this is packing enough power metal traces to stop it from being full-on thrash or speed metal, and they only got heavier on the next album. Had this one on cassette when it was new, and thrilled to finally have a slick copy on wax. Another reissue from 2015, here's a 1983 album from Overdrive, Metal Attack. Now, look at the cover. I mean, if that cover doesn't just scream early 80s European heavy metal, man, you ain't listening. Again, originally released, in 83. This is the debut from Sweden's Overdrive, remastered and reissued once again thanks to High Roller. Fantastic mid-range vocals, galloping rhythms, and full hooks. This combines things like early Riot and Def Leppard and adds in its own European flair and bite. Overdrive unfortunately called it quits just a couple of years later in '85, I think, after only one more album. And they sprung back in the late 2000s, not even 10 years ago, I think, and they've since dropped 3 new albums. I haven't heard a single one of them, but man, this one is a classic and a favorite, and I was amped to find it. Alright, so I gotta admit, the next one kind of took my breath away when it showed up, and it's an album that I have a couple original pressings of already, but it's phenomenal. From 1986, it's Stryper, The Hell with the Devil, and this is special because it's the picture disc release. It comes in the original sleeve with the original sticker. It has a super cool, huge fold-out poster. Let me see if I can show it to you. It's about as complete can be for a 30-year-old release. I mean, just check out the size of that poster, and I don't even know how much of it you can see. So showing up in the original poly bag with the original poster, and here's the vinyl. A very cool album. It was Stryper's second full-length, and along with Soldiers Under Command and Yellow and Black Attack before it, this is the third in a series of what I think are fantastic records, marred only by a few seriously squeeze-the-cheese ballads. Packing a couple of my favorite Stryper tunes to date, though, in the title track and sing-along song. I've had this one since it was released. But, tripping again over an original picture disc version, it just doesn't happen. Nothing new here or anything that's not already been said, but again, a great album, and if you've not heard it, check it out, and a very cool addition to the Stryper collection. Alright, let's wrap it here, because we could go on all day, and I highly doubt you want to watch that. From 1988, this is kind of a blind buy. This is Dear Mr. President, direct from Oregon, released as a self-titled album, again, Dear Mr. President, and then recalled when the White House claimed copyright on the name. They had an issue with it. Whoops! Not a bad way to get started, right? The band changed its name to Flesh and Blood, and the album was reissued as Dead, White, and Blue. Now that we're all confused, this one's a cool and obscure release. Not super heavy, and probably not too tricky to track down, but it combines the bests of bands like the Royal Court of China, Enough's Enough, and The Cult as a mainstream reference. These guys split up a year later, proving that name changes only sound good on paper. And that's it for this month. Feel free to leave a comment below if you have one. Thanks for setting some time aside to catch this, and I'll see you all in the next video. Later.